Hey, what is up guys? D606 returns here. So today I'm going to make a quick non-spoiler review about the new Spider-Man 2 game that came out pretty recently and is obviously getting a lot of hype. I wanted to make this review because, well, mainly because whenever I see a lot of reviews on YouTube, they're very biased and very, I don't know, just very hype-filled. Like, I don't see any reviews that really go deep into any sort of issue that may exist in the game. So that's what I wanted to make this for.
Now, the first thing I think we'll talk about is controls. In terms of web slinging, I have no problems with the controls. In fact, I dare say it's basically the same as Spider-Man 2018 and Miles Morales. So, not much to say on the swinging department. Now, combat, I do have some things to say. In terms of combat, I'd actually say, again, it does pretty well. My main complaint is, believe it or not, the new thing they added to combat called parry. And here's the reason why I don't like it. You have certain times where you think you have to parry, right? But then the enemy can just hit you because apparently you're not supposed to parry that enemy. I really don't like that because it basically, it neuters the combat a little bit, because when you're thinking, oh, I can just parry this enemy, and now you're getting punished for basically thinking you can use this function. Which is nothing that ruins the game completely or anything. I'm just saying it kind of feels weird sometimes. Anyway, yeah, the next thing is gadgets. I really don't like the gadgets in this game because they get rid of a lot of them from the previous games, or at least a lot of the fun ones. And it's weird because there's a specific gadget that you get way later in the game, which makes absolutely no sense, because literally one of those gadgets, they're acting like they didn't have it before, but we literally had it in the first game. If you know what I know, I'm not going to spoil where we get it in the story, because this is supposed to be as non-spoilery as possible. So I'm not going to tell you what the gadget is or what it does. I'm not even going to tell you where you get it, but if you know, you know. In fact, there's a lot of things in this story that feels like it pretends that we didn't do this stuff before purely for the sake of plot, and it feels kind of lazy sometimes. I'm not saying it's lazy. I'm not saying it's bad or anything, but it feels like it sometimes. But I'm not gonna pretend that that isn't something that a bunch of other games do. So again, yeah, that's just the run of the mill sometimes. Next thing we have to talk about is the story. So, here's my opinion on the first part of the story. The first part of the story, to me, is very, very slow. Now, for the record, I'm not saying it's necessarily slow in a bad way. I understand that they need to establish a lot before it gets to the nitty-gritty and all that. So, not saying it's necessarily bad, but it's just very, very, very slow for my liking, and very much on the borderline of being uninteresting. The game doesn't really get, in my opinion, in terms of story, it doesn't really get truly interesting until the middle of the game. That's just my opinion on it. And again, I get why it exists. I get it, because the game is supposed to establish what's going on. Spider-Man 2018 did it. Spider-Man Miles Morales did it. They did this establishing thing. Most of the beginnings of the story for these Spider-Man games aren't top tier amazing, but they're made to establish what your experience is going to be. So I get it. It's no different from the other Spider-Man games. But unlike the other Spider-Man games, I will say that the payoff for this setup definitely feels like it comes way later than it should. So that is something. Now, to get to that middle part, it starts off really strong, right? The thing I hate about it, though, is that it feels so short. Which is, I'm gonna say, is the part where you start, getting into the symbiote side of the story. I'm not gonna say what happens, of course, but, we get to the symbiote side of the story in the middle of the game, and it actually feels very good to play. But it is so unfortunate that it doesn't last for a long time, or at least longer than it should. It feels like it goes very short before, and again, You could argue, yes, you could just play some side stories and make it longer, but like, I'm talking about the main game and the main game's length. And unfortunately, it feels like the biggest, most interesting aspect of the game that, let's face it, most people were waiting for, it feels like it's one of the shortest things in the game. And obviously that is not a good thing, especially because it was what most people were excited for. It just feels so odd that that was the choice they came up with for plot's sake. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but that's how I feel about it. Now, the end part of this game, it is a clusterfuck. It's an enjoyable one, a very enjoyable one, but it is still a clusterfuck regardless, and that can't be glazed over. When I was playing through it, I almost felt like they just threw in a bunch of stuff from the comics, movies, and some video games, and just straight up mixed it together, and just haphazardly combined it and went, yeah, that looks good, do that. It didn't feel like something that was competently thought through. It felt like something that they just rushed into. I'm not saying it's bad. It works for what the purpose is. But to be honest, it feels more like a high to the comic readers than anything else. And the reason why I think this is a bad idea is because the thing that makes Spider-Man 2018 and Miles Morales good is the fact that it can serve as a nice introduction to the Spider-Man universe. This feels like it takes away that element and rewards comic readers more than anything. All that being said, however, it is still very much an enjoyable thing to experience. So again, not a terrible choice, just feels a little convoluted and very compact in some areas where it feels like they were trying to do a lot more than they should have. The final thing I want to talk about is how they handle Peter and Miles being playable in the same game. And unfortunately, I have to say that for me, they didn't handle it too well. And what I mean is this. Peter's story, in my opinion, is a lot more interesting than Miles. Conceptually, Miles is better and more emotionally driven, don't get me wrong, because it goes into the idea of redemption and forgiveness and letting go of hatred and all that. So conceptually, Miles is better. But Peter's is more interesting, not only because of his connection to Harry, but also the whole thing with the symbiote. Also, playing with Peter is a lot more fun in this game. Not that playing with Miles isn't fun, but the missions that they give Miles in terms of the main story, they are really lame. I even found myself bored a couple of times when I was playing with Miles. And I hate that because Spider-Man Miles Morales did such a good job with making him fun to play. But I guess at the end of the day, I can't blame them too much. Handling two main characters that both have major stories, I guess that's pretty hard to handle. And then there's MJ. Oh boy. Who thought MJ was going to be fun to play? Because guess what? She still isn't. I, for the life of me, cannot understand why they still have these MJ sections in this game. I, for the life of me, can't understand it. And the thing is, here's another thing that I don't like. In this story, there's a lot of the times where Peter or Miles will get hit or knocked by somebody who at most for Spider-Man would be a love tap, and they'll be off screen for 2 minutes. It feels very weird. It feels like they couldn't figure out in some places what to do with two Spider-Men, so they just have them get knocked off screen for I don't know, budget's sake or something. I'm not saying budget, obviously, but that's what it feels like sometimes. But then we'll have MJ, I don't know, get thrown through a huge pile of concrete or something and sliding on the ground and she'll be fine. Sometimes it just feels very inconsistent for plot's sake, but I guess that has to happen in some areas. But anyway, back to MJ gameplay. It's not fun. It's a little bit better than it was in the previous game because MJ actually has real combat now. Apparently she did some training and whatnot, which all good for her and all that. But again, who wanted these gameplay scenes? Who wanted these? Nobody likes them. I promise you guys, MJ is not cool. She's not fun to play as. She never was. End of story. That's why I think Miles Morales gets a point over this game, because they didn't have these stupid MJ scenes. I'm sorry, I hate them. And that's not just me. Everybody hates them. Nobody likes them. I'll be beating a dead horse if I go any further. You get the idea. Nobody likes these. They're very annoying. Let's just move on. So I think I'm gonna go to the ending thoughts of the game. Obviously, like any video game that will ever exist, it has issues. For people to imply that this game is perfect is very wrong and very stupid also. But that being said, as much as I have some gripes with this game, it is overall an amazing experience that you truly don't want to miss out on. At the end of the day, however you may feel about certain aspects of the game, even how I feel about certain aspects of the game, doesn't take away the fact that it is still very much a fun and enjoyable experience to have. Insomniac did a good job. There are some issues, sure, like any game. Any game has issues, but it's still a very good game overall. Web slinging is still as fun as it used to be. Combat is very interesting, and they did make some improvements while also having some bad things in it as well from those improvements. The story is interesting. It does feel a little bit of a clusterfuck at times, but it's still a good story for the most part. Playing as Miles and Peter is still very fun, despite how poorly handled it is at times. And it's all around just a very good game. So I still highly recommend buying it and trying it for yourself to see how you like it. But these were just my personal thoughts on the game, and I think I'm done with that. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.